Good afternoon and welcome to the Grande Prairie City Council meeting for Monday, March 23rd, 2020. I was about to say ask everyone in attendance to rise and join us in singing O Canada. But before we do that, we'll call the meeting to order. And I do have a recommendation and a recommended motion that the required number of attending members of council to achieve quorum, except for the chair, may attend all concurrently scheduled City Council and Standing Committee meetings via teleconference until further notice. Councillor Blackburn, would you care to make that motion?
Yes, I would. So moved.
Okay. Thanks very much, Councillor Blackburn. Is there any discussion or debate on that motion? Hearing none, then I will call for any opposed. I hear none opposed, so that is a unanimous motion, Council. I'll just confirm, Council members that are on the line, that is a unanimous motion. Again, I hear none opposed, so thank you. So we'll confirm that as a unanimous motion, and we'll declare that carried. And so I should actually, before we go any further, I will identify actually that we have all council members in attendance: Councillor Blackburn, Bressie, Clayton, Friesen, Minhas, O'Toole, Plott, and Thiessen joining the council meeting live via telecom. We have the city manager here in City Council chambers, the director of corporate services, the city clerk, and an IT technician supporting us. And I believe we have our other directors on teleconference as well. So it is a full council meeting, just there's only so many of us in the room. And that motion that we just passed is what will enable us to go forward and operate this way so that we can continue to keep the business of local government running. So thank you very much for that motion. And thank you very much, everybody, for managing with us as we get used to this new way of operating and the bumps that may come along with it. Okay, with that, as is our tradition, we will have the singing of the national anthem.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you to the National Film Board for the images of our country and to alumni of our Grande Prairie Boys Choir for the audio. We'll move into the adoption of council meeting minutes. First, we have the council meeting minutes from Monday, March 9th, 2020. Councillor Bressie, would you like to make a motion to adopt that set of minutes?
So moved.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Bressie. Are there any errors or omissions, any changes we need to make before we adopt those minutes officially? Hearing none, then I will call for any in opposition. Again, hearing none in opposition, then we will declare that motion carried. We'll move on next to item 3.2, the special City Council meeting, March 18th. Councillor Clayton, would you care to move that set of minutes?
Sure, I would move that Council adopt the minutes of the special City Council meeting held Wednesday, March 18th, 2020, as presented.
Thanks very much, Councillor Clayton. Is there any discussion or debate on that set of minutes? Is there anything we need to change before we adopt them? Okay. Hearing no one, then I will ask if there's anyone in opposition to adopting that set of minutes as proposed. Again, I'll just do a second call. And hearing none, then we will declare those minutes adopted by unanimous vote. We'll move on to item number 4, the adoption of the agenda. Council, in your package, The recommendation is to adopt the agenda as presented. Since the package was publicly put forward, administration has an additional item to add, item 7.3, property tax deferral. Could I get a motion to adopt the agenda with that addition of 7.3, property tax deferral? I think Councillor Friesen, you'd be the next in the list.
Yeah, so I will move that council adopt the agenda as amended with the addition of 7.3, property tax deferral.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Friesen. Is there any discussion or debate on the agenda as amended? Hearing none, then I will ask for the vote. And anyone opposed to adopting the agenda as amended? Again, hearing none, I will declare that motion passed unanimously, and we will move through our agenda. This is a regular City Council agenda, so we have all of our standing agenda items as contained in our procedure bylaw. The first is open delegations. Obviously, we don't have anybody in City Hall today for open delegations, but as time progresses through the situation, administration is considering how we will maintain public participation during those set portions of our agenda where we have that opportunity, and for any public hearings the city may need to move during this time. But for today, we have nobody here for delegation portion of our agenda. We also have no items of unfinished business, and so that would take us to reports. And we'll first go to item 7.1, CAO update, and I'll turn to Mr. Galante.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will provide a brief situational update regarding the COVID-19 situation, some provincial updates, and then at the local level. If we can put the graph on the screen, please. So at this time, there are 6 provincial, 90 municipal emergency operation centers active in the province, and there are 35 states of local emergency declared in the province at this time. The Canada and US border is closed to non-essential travel, and on the screen you can see the current number of cases confirmed in the province, and the province has added a line below in gray, and that is a statistical calculation to show the impact of the current reality in the red line. So the gray line is depicting the evolution if doubling every 2 days. So it's more intense than that, just to have an idea of the magnitude of the spread in the province. So some numbers are related to the provincial level, and this is up to yesterday. We had 259 cases to yesterday, with an increase on 33 cases yesterday. There are 18 cases in the north zone. Calgary is seeing the majority of these cases with 164 cases as yesterday, with an increase in 25 cases in a day. Some jurisdictional comparison across provinces in Canada. In Alberta, we have 259 cases. British Columbia is 424. Ontario, 377. And Quebec, 221. With the total cases in the country, again, this has yesterday's information, 1,371. Another items I want to mention is that we are planning to extend the state of local emergency this Wednesday. As you may recall, we enacted that last Wednesday. The validity of the initial declaration is 7 days. So we will be extending that for another 7 days, and we'll continue with routine extensions over the next few weeks, considering the evolution of the spread. Important to note that some major Canadian airlines may discontinue international services by the end of March. That means a significant number of snowbirds and repatriated Canadians will arrive in the country during the next week or 10 days. and that may impose a higher risk of propagation of COVID-19. A few hours ago, we learned that Ontario and Quebec will have shelter-in-place orders by Wednesday this week for 2 weeks in terms of all non-essential businesses. And there will be a list of what's considered essential and non-essential for those two provinces. We are monitoring the situation here in Alberta in case the province decides to follow suit with that. So I will provide a brief update about city operations on the different service areas, highlights of the weeks and the week before, and what is coming in terms of operational priorities for this week. In terms of infrastructure and economic development, for the past week, the inspection services department staff is operating on a 2-week rotation, with half staff performing inspections and half staff working from home to improve the chances of having a full staffing contingent. Inspections are operating at minimum QMP, that's our quality management plan, so I'm performing just absolute minimum inspections and utilizing verification of completion to aid in social distancing. The Parks Department has closed all playgrounds as per the GPREP direction. Parks has also discontinued the outdoor rink maintenance to improve social distancing. Development permitting and inspections have processes in place to issue permits while the service center is shut down. For the upcoming week, engineering department is evaluating a process to bring more capital projects online if federal or provincial funding becomes available to stimulate the economy in the very near future. Transportation and Parks is preparing for a snowfall. There is a snowfall warning right now in effect, and planning for the spring melt to avoid any flooding as we had in previous years. There are no current issues with staffing levels in the Transportation Department. Transportation and Parks is also evaluating minimum staffing for summer operations and redeployment of other QP staff from Eastlink Center, Day Bar, and other closed city facilities to staff summer operations. Economic Development is monitoring provincial, federal stimulus measures and working with local stakeholders. Infrastructure and Economic Development will be looking at minimum staffing requirements over the next week. For the corporate services service area, in overall, the corporate services service area supported a managed public closure of all city facilities and scale up resources to support the work from home. We issued that directive to all city employees on Friday. The next priority will be to support analysis of an ongoing operating model to scale the size of the organization according to the demands. For communications and marketing, they are both supporting GPREP and CityComs. GIS and IT, they are very busy ensuring critical staff had access to hardware to support work from home and roll out a brand new secure portal for employees to access city systems from home computers. Finance is implemented a redundancy to support core pay and financial control functions remotely. Corporate efficiency and strategic initiatives developed an absentee level tracking tool, and they are busy on the implementation of business continuity plans for the entire organization. Human Resources is addressing an increase in employee questions and have increased the dialogue and cooperation with our QP union. Taxation and Assessment supported the development of options for tax deferral that is coming in this agenda. And Procurement has established an inventory and distribution site for key operational requirements, including cleaning supplies, vehicle filters, chemicals that may be required over the medium term. For community services, since the closure of city facilities, the remaining staff have been doing deep cleaning of the facilities at Eastlink Center, Coca-Cola Center, Day Bar, and Revolution Place. Other departments have also sent surplus resources to our facilities to assist with this task. The Collision Reporting Center remains open at Eastlink Center. Free regular transit and accessible transit services are in place until end of May. Day Bar facility is being prepared as an overflow shelter in case needed, and will be ready on Wednesday. And that will be a 24/7 operations, and we have plans in place for food delivery, medications, etc. Finally, for protective and social services, as you are aware, GPREP declared also a regional state of local emergency last week. There's a full activation of the Emergency Operations Center. All sections are activated, and even down into the orchard for branches, task forces, and strike teams. We have plans for emergency services continuity, vulnerable persons isolation, and supply chain management. We have established industry liaison position that is Mr. Arlen Miller, and is the primary contact with supermarkets, pharmacies, and major employers in the region. Also, the GPREP website has been updated. For the coming week, we have emergency food and prescription programs ready to be launched. We're working on the establishment of a third shelter as overflow for Rotary House. We are doing some experiments with our virtual emergency operations center, only keeping 4 people, the 4 section chiefs on site, and the other sections on the orchard are working remotely. And we continue with the pandemic planning and a plan to execute a shelter-in-place order is developed at 80% in case of provincial or federal directive next week. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's my update.
Okay, thanks very much, City Manager Galante. Is there any business arising from the City Manager's report? And maybe I'll just do the same thing. I'll just go alphabetical through council members, just to ask if you had anything arising. Councillor Thiessen, did you have anything arising?
No business, just a question. Still getting asked lots in the community about COVID testing sites and when we may be looking at being fully operational down at the Radburn Pavilion.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are in constant communication with Alberta Health Services. They are not requiring the site at this moment. However, the site is ready. And there is one specific doctor at the emergency room doing testing. So that's the current situation. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Galante. Councillor Palat, did you have anything arising out of the CAO report?
Yes, I do, Mayor Gibbon. More just maybe some question. I don't know if it'll need any more than that, but just a question for CEO Galante there. Just with our capital projects you mentioned, I'm just wondering if there's going to be a review of all the 2020 capital projects we kind of were currently looking at, and just, I guess, wondering if there's anything that needs to, if some of these can maybe be looked at moving back, or some things need to be retweaked, or if what council's going to be involvement with the capital project as it may change over the year here now.
Mr. Galante.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that is correct. Engineering is currently assessing the likelihood of proceeding with the 2020 capital plan as originally approved. Some major projects we are connecting with the main contractors in town to get a kind of a temperature check about how they feel in terms of labor and materials supply. As you know, chain of supply, the procurement chain could be affected, not only for groceries, but also for construction materials. So engineering is actively monitoring that. So far, the plan is to proceed as approved in the capital plan. The situation is very dynamic, and we will notify Council if any changes on the capital plan are required. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Galante. Councillor O'Toole, any questions?
Yeah, Mayor Given, I do have one question. I've had a number of people ask me what's happening with the airport. Are we going to stop flights coming in and out in the near future, or has that been talked about already?
Mr. City Manager.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am personally in communication with the airport CAO pretty much on daily basis and sometimes several times a day. So what I can inform right now is there is some consideration with other regional airports in the country, similar size like Grande Prairie, to reduce number of operations, the hours of operations to a small window per day. Of course, the airport will remain open for medevac services and emergency services, but the open for the public hours will be reduced probably to a 4-hour window per day. The majority of the flights are coming empty, and they are closely monitoring the number of passengers arriving and departing Grande Prairie. That measure may come on Wednesday or Thursday this week in terms of the 4-hour window of operation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that update. Much appreciated.
Councillor Friesen, did you have any questions for the CAO?
Not at this time, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Friesen. Councillor Clayton, did you have anything arising?
I do, Mayor Given. However, I would like to make a motion to go in camera for my discussion.
Sure. So, Councillor Clayton, we unfortunately can't do that at this time. Given the technology that we're working with, we don't have an ability for me to continue to chair a meeting while closing it off to the webcast while knowing who's on the other end of the phone calls.
Right.
If we had a little bit of a heads up, we could have maybe figured a way to do that, but I didn't have noticed that. It is something that we will have to discuss and figure out corporately how we'll do it, but I can't accept a motion to go in camera today.
Okay, fair enough. I can send my comments to the CAO. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and my apologies. Councillor Bressie, did you have anything arising?
Yeah, thank you. I've just got a question for our CAO, and it's in regarding to family and community support services funding. The province has announced that they're going to be injecting $60 million into that for nonprofits that are working with vulnerable populations right now. I'm curious if we've heard anything yet about how that's going to be deployed locally in terms of how much will it be going through the city, and if so, how much will we be receiving?
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have any details about the deployment of that funding. However, I believe Mr. Manuel is online as well, and Chris may have further details that I don't have details right now.
Okay, so we'll try and see how that works to bring in one of our directors. Mr. Manuel, are you on the line as well?
I am here. I can tell you I have a limited amount of information about it. I can certainly send more. My understanding is that it's primarily being distributed through the FCSS funding stream and directly to a handful of shelters. At this point, it's primarily focused on providing housing supports, shelter supports, for the vulnerable population, and budgets have had to be submitted to the province regarding that.
Okay, so if administration has additional information, they would forward that then to council, just so that we're aware?
We will.
Thanks, Mr. Manuel. Councillor Bressie, anything else on that point?
No, I think just a comment on that is I'm looking forward to getting that information, and we're often advocating to the province to make sure it maintains funding its portion of FCSS. I hope council will be open to the conversation of doing a municipal match to what the province injects to our community. But I'll wait to get more information to really start pushing that with council.
Thanks, Councillor Bressie. Councillor Blackburn, did you have anything arising from the city manager's report?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Blackburn. So then I would ask for a motion to receive the city manager's report for information, and I think Councillor Minhas, you were next on my list. Would you be willing to make that motion?
Yeah, I could.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Minhas. So I will ask for the vote on that. Is there anyone opposed to the motion to receive the city manager's report for information? Hearing no one, then we will declare that motion passed unanimously. And we'll move on next to the deputy mayor schedule. Council, as I mentioned before, you would have received a emailed out revision to the deputy mayor schedule, recognizing that Councillor Blackburn's health does not put him in a good position to be deputy mayor at this time, as he was previously scheduled. The revised schedule would shift that around so that we would have Councillor O'Toole take on deputy mayor now, followed by Councillor Friesen, Councillor Minhas, Councillor Plott, and then Councillor Blackburn towards the end of our council year, as you can see on screen if you're watching along. Is there any discussion, sorry, I need to get used to the order here. Can I have a motion from Councillor O'Toole? Would you care to make the motion to adopt the deputy mayor schedule as recommended?
Mayor Given, I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Councillor O'Toole. Is there any discussion or debate on that schedule as recommended? Hearing none, then I will call for the vote on the adoption of the deputy mayor schedule revision as recommended. Is there anyone opposed? Hearing none, then we will declare that motion adopted unanimously, and we will move on to item 7.3, property tax deferral. Mr. City Manager, are you going to be introducing this, or is okay? Mr. City Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So over the last week and during the weekend, our finance and taxation department, they have been in contact with multiple counterparts across the province and trying to study different ways to help the community in these times. So CLT generated a briefing note that I believe now is part of the agenda package with a series of recommendations. So we perform an analysis in terms of some options that we consider appropriate in order to help the community, but also to preserve the financial health of the organization. So when it comes to full recovery, hopefully in the next few months, we will be in a solid position as well as a corporation. So we perform an analysis on some options. For example, we consider delay in the tax notice mailing. We consider deferral of property tax due date, a penalty elimination, and delay on the tax sales. Also collection activities that could be put on hold until further notice, and all the non-sufficient fund charges related to the auto pay or tips program that could be stopped until further notice. I just want to highlight that the province is actively also studying different alternatives, and we just heard a few minutes ago that they are working on some options in terms of the schooled requisition component of the tax bill. So that is a new factor. We just received news in half an hour ago that may alter our plan a little bit. So after consideration, and you have all the details in the briefing note, administration is advising council to pass a motion in order to give us direction to work in bringing back amendments to the relevant bylaws in order to establish August 31st, 2020 as the property tax deadline. This includes both residential and non-residential classes. So the original deadline, as you know, is June 30th. So this is a 60-day deferral on the tax deadline for 2020. Also to eliminate the May and July penalty calculations for both residential and non-residential classes. That means approximately $900,000 in benefit for the community. However, the corporation of the City of Grande Prairie will have to absorb that amount And we have a plan now in place. I briefly mentioned that during my CIO report about calibrating the size of the organization for the demands on services. And we're looking at multiple scenarios, but we are going to go back to more core operations over the next few weeks. So that will help in the absorption of the $900,000 for the corporation. The other item that we recommend is to stop all reminders and notices for the tax arrears until September 1st, 2020. That will be the new tax deadline. And stop all non-sufficient fund charges on the monthly withdrawal or TIPS program until September 1st, 2020. So that's in a nutshell the work that the administration performed over the last few days and the weekend to bring this to council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks very much, Mr. City Manager. So council did have an opportunity, I believe, to be briefed on this recommendation from administration in advance. And so I will, actually, I'll first ask for a motion so we can have this up for discussion and debate, and then we'll ask if there's any discussion and debate. So I think Councillor Plott, you are next on our list. Would you care to make the motion as recommended by administration?
Sure, but my screen just shut off me for some reason. So could I get somebody else to jump in on this one?
Well, so you actually don't even need to get all the words.
Just to say the property tax deferral as recommended by administration.
Sure, exactly. Thanks very much, Councillor Plott. And so with that motion on the floor, I'll ask for a discussion debate, and we'll just do that in an orderly process again. We'll go through the list just to see if there's any discussion or debate by calling on council members individually. And we'll start the opposite direction on our list with Councillor Blackburn first. Councillor Blackburn, anything for discussion or debate on that recommendation or motion?
No, I have nothing to add. The proposal is quite acceptable in my thinking.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Blackburn. Councillor Bressie, anything to add or discussion debate?
Yeah, I'll be supporting this, and I just really want to commend administration, not just for bringing back great options for us, but also for doing it so quickly. I know we've been working really hard lately to become a more flexible and nimble organization, and I think this really shows that effort paying off. The fact that we're potentially going to be one of the first, if not the first, municipality in Alberta to be talking about this kind of deferral. That's really exciting to me that we can pull that off. So just a big thank you to administration.
Great. Thanks for that, Councillor Bressie. Councillor Clayton, anything for discussion debate?
Not right now, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Clayton. Councillor Friesen, anything for discussion or debate on the recommendation?
No, I'm also in favor of this recommendation. I appreciate that that we are thinking about our residents at this time and the ways that we can help. So thank you. No questions. Thanks, Councillor Friesen. Councillor Minhas, any discussion or debate?
Yeah, I'm in favor of it. And also, there are two people already asking me about this. If you can defer the debts for 3 months or something like the provincial government did some areas. That was a great thing. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Minhas. Councillor O'Toole, anything for discussion or debate?
No discussion, but just a comment. I want to thank administration for working above and beyond this weekend and the last week. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor O'Toole.
I'm in total support.
Thanks, Councillor. I'm going to skip over Councillor Plott and go to Councillor Thiessen. Councillor Plott, since you're the mover of the motion, I'll give you the opportunity to close. Councillor Thiessen, anything for discussion or debate?
Nothing for discussion, just similar comments and sentiments to our administration. Thank you very much for all the hard work that went into putting this together, and I'll be supporting.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. Councillor Plott, I'll come to you to close on the motion.
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. Yeah, I want to thank administration for this one too. I'm sure, like all of us, we've got a lot of people phoning in trying to stop the bleeding any way possible, so this is definitely going to help that. I guess just a question or maybe a comment for administration as well is how we're going to message this to the community. I know there's been a lot of fear about what's going to happen. Our landlords are going to pass this along if they choose to defer. And I just want to be, hopefully, the city can message it in a way that, you know, it's not a time of shaming, but at the same time, you know, you should be doing the right thing. And I don't know how we can message that, but I certainly hope that, you know, the landlords out there are passing this on, and we're helping everybody get through this time. So I'm full support of it, and I appreciate the motion.
Thanks, Councillor Plott. Yeah, you know, just on that last point, maybe I'll just speak to it. I think the city will through our communications, make sure that everybody's aware of this change, proposed change, and I should identify this as proposed change. We're directing administration to prepare the necessary bylaws. So council, we would see this come back with the necessary bylaw changes. As you all know, we have bylaws that we pass every year dealing with property tax and everything else. So we'll make sure the community is informed about what we're doing. But I think, Councillor Plott, your further point is, what will the discussion between landlords and renters be? And I would hope that would be a discussion. There may be some renters and landlords that would prefer not to have a balloon payment at the end. And so there probably is some nuance there where everybody should be talking about this. But I think the city's job is to make sure that everybody is aware that that we've taken this action, and that hopefully that'll initiate the discussion between renters and owners. But we will see the technical details of this come back at a subsequent council meeting when we're asked to pass the bylaws to actually move this forward. So,
Mayor Given, if I could get in when you're done your round.
Sure, yeah. Councillor Clayton, do you have something further?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the comments that both you and Councillor Plott had there. I think that it's great to see some initiatives out there from landlords who are respectful of keeping their tenants, and I've heard many instances where a rental company is rewarding tenants in good standing in hopes that this supports them in a time so that in turn they don't have to break their leases over the next few months, etc. So there are some good things already out there happening. However, I think it's, in our messaging, if you are a landlord and you're able to support your tenants, we strongly encourage it. And the other thing that's important in the messaging, in my opinion, is that if you're able to afford to pay your property taxes, in simple terms, we need the money to operate. So we need you to pay your property taxes if you can. However, if you need that support from the city, I think this is a great initiative. But it needs to go. The conversation needs to sort of be a two-way conversation. So I appreciate the information that was brought forward today.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Clayton, and I would agree with you on that last point too. If not everybody is immediately impacted in their work and their sort of income opportunities through this, and so those businesses and people that can't afford to pay their property taxes on time and through the regular schedule should. This is put in place to provide some flexibility and liquidity for those who might not be able to. I think you make an excellent point, and we'll make sure that the city communication reflects that the revenue that comes from property taxes does help us deliver critical services, especially at a time like this. So with that, then we'll have that as our round of discussion and debate. I will call for the vote on the motion, and I will ask if there is anyone opposed. I hear none, so we will declare that motion carried unanimously. And we'll move on to our next agenda item.
Sorry, Mayor Given, could I make a motion with business arising?
Oh, thanks very much, Councillor Bressie. Yeah, you had something business arising?
Yeah, thank you. And what I'd like to move is a motion that council direct the mayor to write to Minister Glubish, who's in charge of Service Alberta, and other MLAs to advocate for immediate resources to be provided to landlords and tenants to prevent evictions due to loss of income caused by COVID-19. And just throw on the phone, I don't know how well everybody can hear. Let me read that one more time. So I move that council direct the mayor to write to Minister Glubish and other MLAs to advocate for immediate resources to be provided to landlords and tenants to prevent evictions due to loss of income caused by COVID-19. And to speak to this, I think there's a lot of help happening right now for people who are in owner-occupied homes. I think that the city giving property tax deferral will help them with their liquidity and cash flow. I think that there's been an effort by the banks to give deferrals on mortgages. That's very good. But I'm hearing from a lot of renters saying, hey, that's great. That stuff's all great if my landlord's good. But what if they don't choose to pass it down to me like 95% of landlords will? I'm also hearing from landlords in the city saying, hey, the banks actually aren't allowing us to defer the mortgages on our rental properties. They're only letting us do that on owner-occupied properties. And so I think there's a lot of worry in the community right now. Well, not a lot of worry. I think there's some people in our community who are very worried that they're going to have to deal with a tenant losing their place. And the city can't directly get involved in that because we have no authority over the landlord-tenant relationship. But I think it's incumbent on us to make it clear to the province that this is a priority in our community, and we hope it will use whatever resources and powers are at its fingertips to make sure not just homeowners and property owners are cared for, but also renters are cared for.
So for further clarity then, Councillor Bressie, I just want to thank you for forwarding that motion to all of council in advance and to administration in advance, giving us a heads up and a chance to consider and see it. So thank you for that. And just to be clear, so your motion is really about the City of Grande Prairie advocating, and specifically advocating that the province support those conversations between tenants and landowners. I just want to make sure that my understanding is clear that it wasn't specifically to prevent evictions, but was to encourage there to be resources to facilitate those conversations. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. And I think that I'm leaving it a little bit open-ended based on some feedback from my colleagues in terms of don't want to get too technical in what we're asking for. But I think one mechanism the minister could use if he chose to take an action like this is to create more capacity in the residential tenancy dispute resolution service to get more cases through. Or maybe there's a line to extend lines of credit to people who have those revenue properties that the banks are extending their mortgage for. I think there's a few tools there. And I'm hesitant to specify exactly the tool that should be used in this motion and speak specifically to the idea around eviction. I'm hesitant to say, hey, our position is nobody should be evicted because there's a very few, but there are a few people who are perennial challenging tenants who I fear might take advantage of the situation. And that's not just bad for their landlord, it's also bad for their neighborhoods and for their neighbors, and sometimes dangerous for their neighbors. So I'm hesitant to say, hey, shut down evictions. I think that there should be a broader approach saying, how do we keep people in their home when they're dealing with a loss of income?
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Bressie, and again, thanks for circulating that ahead of time so everybody had a chance to see it. So I will ask if there are any questions or discussion on Councillor Bressie's motion. Councillor Thiessen, any questions or discussion?
No, I'm in support of the action.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Thiessen. Councillor Plott?
No, I'm in support of the action as well, and I really appreciate Councillor Bressie bringing this forward because I've definitely heard concerns on both sides, and I think this is the right forum for it to go, for sure.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Plott. Councillor O'Toole?
I'm totally in favor of it. I had some concerns when I first read it, but I'm still totally in favor of it.
Okay, thanks, Councillor O'Toole. Councillor Minhas?
Yes, I'm totally in favor. That's a very good one. We need it.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Minhas. Councillor Friesen?
Yeah, I'm in favor of it as stated at this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clayton?
Yeah, no questions. I will support this motion. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Blackburn?
I'm definitely in support of the motion, and I thank Councillor Bressie for his work on it.
Thank you. Councillor Bressie, anything to close?
No, but just thank you to Council for being so ready and willing to support our community in this hard time.
Thanks, Councillor Bressie. So we will call for the vote on that motion. Is there anyone opposed? I don't believe I heard anybody there, but we'll ask formally. Was there anyone opposed? Hearing none, then we will declare that motion carried unanimously. I guess I will ask, is there any other business arising? Hearing none, then we'll move on.
Mayor Gibbons, sorry.
Councillor Plott?
Sorry, Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to, I just want to get the pulse, I guess, a little bit of a council because we don't get to chat with about this kind of stuff. But I know one thing that's been talked about lots in the community with business anyways is what's our management recovery plan around that. And I think GPREP's doing an amazing job of what they're doing, and I have full confidence that we're going to be safe. I'm just wondering how the organizations at some point start the communication of do we need to have a GPREP for financial recovery sooner than later. And just maybe if Director Galante could ask if there's something like that that would be coming from administration. I won't ask for a formal motion, but I would love to start having some dialogue around that sooner than later.
And Councillor Plott, can I just
sorry, CEO, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure you didn't take offense, but Councillor Plott, could you just clarify what you mean by financial recovery? Do you mean for the corporate organization of the City of Grande Prairie or somebody else?
I think, internally, hopefully we're working on that. I mean for the communities at large here, involved in our region, of the financial recovery of what this looks like for businesses to recover from this. Lots of smart people reaching out with ideas, but I don't even know where to park them at this point or where they go, because they're not really GPREP's normal responsibility. But I'm wondering if we can start having a financial recovery regional thought on how we get this going, so we get some dialogue going in some form.
I see Mr. Galante nodding his head. Mr. Galante?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For sure, due to the magnitude of the event, we are looking, of course, at the federal and provincial levels as well as part of this big picture in terms of financial recovery for the community. And rest assured, we're working diligently in our financial recovery for the corporation of the City of Grande Prairie, but we will probably implement one liaison position as part of our economic development team to start receiving those ideas from businesses and different people in the community. So at least there is a mechanism in place to collect ideas and start working on that. And of course, economic development is watching federal and provincial levels as well. But we will establish that this week and will be communicated to the community as well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Galante. Thanks for, Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, that'll be much appreciated.
Councillor Clayton.
Sorry, Mayor, given it's Councillor Clayton here, if I could just add something to Councillor Plott's message there. I think that to CAO Galante's point, communicating with the municipality and what the future looks like in economic recovery is important. However, as we all know, this is a health issue at this time and not an economic issue at this time. But going forward, we need to be prepared for that. Echoing and supporting what the province and what the feds are doing in regards to, putting some injection into economic recovery are going to be keys to our success coming out of this. So if there's an opportunity for the corporate leadership team or the CAO to have discussions through economic development with the council, with the chamber, with any of these, the Petroleum Association, with any of these organizations, I think that it would be great for council to be updated on that. So as we go along, if there's an opportunity to, maybe have a different council meeting to get an update, or if it's through emails, whatever that may be, I think that the more people in the discussion on this case, the better, and especially the organizations that truly sort of work in those sectors. As much as we need to be dealing with the health issue, there needs to be work happening for sure that behind the scenes, so we'll be prepared when we come out of it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the issue's been flagged, and we'll look to administration to provide some advice to council on how best to move forward. And so I see that that's been recorded here and captured. Thanks very much, council, for raising that. We'll move on to item 8.11. Bylaw C875, or repeal of Bylaw C875, the unsafe containers bylaw. I would look to our city clerk for an introduction on this. This is coming out of our policy and review committee. And I would just note that this is a regular piece of work that would have come up COVID or not. And it's great to see that the work of the organization continues. So I'll go to the city clerk just for an introduction on this bylaw.
Thank you, Mayor Given. At the last Bylaw and Policy Review Committee meeting back in February, administration did bring forward a number of bylaws that are just out of date. They no longer support the activities or the services that the city supplies, and this is one of those bylaws. So, of course, because it was given 3 readings to pass, we need to give it 3 readings to repeal.
Okay, thanks very much. So I will go to Councillor Thiessen. I think you're next on my list. And Councillor Thiessen, I'm going to ask you to make all 3 readings, obviously not all at once, but can I ask if you would care to give a motion for first reading?
Yeah, that wouldn't be a problem, Mayor Given. I would move that Council give first reading to Bylaw C-875A, being a bylaw to repeal Bylaw C-875.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Thiessen. So no discussion or debate on first reading. I'll call for the vote. Is there anyone in opposition? Hearing none, then I will declare that motion passed unanimously on first reading. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I would move that Council give second reading to Bylaw C-875A.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Thiessen. So motion for second reading. We can have discussion and debate. Is there anyone that wishes to have any discussion or debate related to this bylaw repeal? Hearing none, then I will call for the vote. Is there anyone who wishes to vote in opposition to second reading? Again, hearing none, then I will declare that motion carried unanimously. Councillor Thiessen.
Moving right along, Mayor Given, I would move that Council have third reading of Bylaw C-875A at this meeting.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Thiessen. So this is a motion to have third and final reading at this meeting. If this motion doesn't pass, then we would have to carry over that third and final reading to our next council meeting. Council, any discussion or debate as to the merits of having third and final reading? And hearing no one ring in or speak up, is there anyone who wishes to vote in opposition to having third reading? Hearing none, then I will declare that motion carried unanimously, and we can have third and final reading. Councillor Thiessen.
All right, to finish it up, I'd move that Council give third reading to Bylaw C-875A, being a bylaw to repeal Bylaw C-875.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Thiessen. And one final opportunity, any discussion or debate? Hearing none, then I will call for the vote. Is there anyone who wishes to vote in opposition to third and final reading? And hearing none, I will declare that motion carried unanimously. And that'll take us to item 8.1.2, repeal of bylaw C-970 mobile unit assessment. I don't know if anyone on administration wanted to introduce this to explain what it is. Council members have seen it in the council package. And if there wasn't anything arising, I would look to, we'll go backwards through the order of motions to Councillor Palat. Councillor Palat, would you care to make first reading of bylaw C-970A to repeal bylaw C-970?
Sure. So I'd make the motion that Council defeat give first reading to bylaw C-970-A, being a bylaw to repeal bylaw C-970.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Palat. I will call for the vote on first reading and no discussion or debate on first reading. Is there anyone opposed? Hearing none, then I will declare that motion carried unanimously. Councillor Palat, would you move on to second reading?
You bet. So I'd ask Council to give second reading to bylaw C-970A.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Palat. Any discussion or debate on second reading? Hearing none, then I will call for the vote on second reading. Is there anyone opposed? Hearing none, then we will declare that motion carried unanimously. Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I'd move that we have third reading of bylaw C-970A at this meeting.
Thanks very much, Councillor Platt. As with the last bylaw, this is a motion to have third and final reading here. If this doesn't pass unanimously, then it would come back. Any discussion or debate as to having third and final reading? Hearing none, then I will call for the vote. Is there anyone opposed to having third and final reading? Hearing none, I'll declare that motion passed unanimously, and we can move on. Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I would recommend that we give third reading to bylaw C-970A, being the bylaw to repeal C-970.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Palat. Any discussion or debate on third and final reading? Again, hearing none, I will call for the vote. Is there anyone opposed to third and final reading of bylaw C-970A? Hearing none, I'll declare that motion carried unanimously. That will take us into items of correspondence, of which we have none this afternoon. We had nobody in our open delegation. We do have a notice of motion. There is no requirement for council to vote on a notice of motion. It's just that, a notice that at our next council meeting, a motion will be made. Councillor Minhas has brought this forward with respect to his vote on bylaw C 1260-15, that he'd like to reconsider that vote. And so this notice of motion is presented today. The council will be asked to vote on that at our subsequent council meeting. And there will be some technical matters that we'll have to figure out how we're going to deal with, given that this was related to a public hearing and not all members of council were in attendance at that public hearing, and so therefore cannot vote on the motion. So that'll be an interesting and fun one to deal with next time. But for council's information, the notice of motion is here today. I just want to make sure that I'm following along with my agenda. So that is provided for council information. We, of course, have no public hearings. I will go to council member reports, and we'll start first with Councillor Thiessen. I think you had a couple. And Councillor Thiessen, if you can just go through them in order, make sure that you're identifying which one you're reporting on, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Given. Just a quick update. We'll go in order. Grande Prairie Foundation. We haven't had any official meetings, but we've been receiving updates as a board. We have a meeting coming up this Friday, but after the call for the pandemic, we limited visitorship and officially put all of our lodges on lockdown. And all reports are saying that seniors are doing well and they understand the situation and appreciate the care and concern that staff has put in. And we're doing our best to keep communication up with the residents and keep everyone informed, as well as their family members and loved ones. So far, there are no confirmations of any staff or residents having COVID-19 to date. We have a few in self-isolation after returning from out-of-country travel. And a couple staff or members are working from home due to school and daycare closures. But staff is still working at capacity, and we are still looking for casuals to assist as a precaution for the potential that one of our existing staff members may get sick. As far as facilities go, we've increased our disinfection of the facilities, removed the cross-use of employees from location to location, discontinued the bus service as all lodges are under lockdown, and practicing and providing education on social distancing to the residents. We're also trying to use online systems to assist families to connect with their loved ones using Grande Prairie Foundation iPads. Overall, it's been pretty busy working together, but again, so far so good, and we're hoping that we don't have any negative updates to provide in the future, and I'll have future updates after our meeting on Friday. Moving right along, just a quick note for the Nighthawk Board. We meet tomorrow to discuss the closure of the hill, but to anyone who wasn't aware and still wanted to go skiing, it is no longer possible as Nighthawk Ski Hill, due to the COVID pandemic, has closed their winter operations for the 2019-2020 season as of last Wednesday. So, time to pack up the skis and snowboard. Apologies from the organization, and I will have a future update as well after we meet tomorrow. Finally, same thing with the Mighty Peace Watershed Alliance. Our last gathering was with the executive group, March 3rd in Spruce Grove. We had a meeting with Alberta Environment and Parks and all the WPACs across the province to discuss the province's expectations on WPAC outcomes and the services that we are expected to provide. There's discussions about funding and about communication and consideration for the work that WPACs do. Apparently, the Mighty Peace Watershed Alliance was not the only WPAC that had issues with communication with the province, as that was brought up by pretty much all WPACs across the province with Alberta Environment and Parks, and they vowed to be more consistent in their communication line and more considerate about the products that we supply them, such as the Integrated Watershed Management Plan. Besides that, we have canceled all meetings pretty much until our AGM and all education sessions due to this COVID crisis. And in saying that, that is my 3 updates from external communications. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Thiessen. Councillor Bressi, I believe you had 2 for us.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I'll talk about the library board. I got to sit in on the library board meeting while Councillor Friesen was out of town, which was fun for me. A few things worth bringing back to council is just some cool updates I heard. Was one, a recent study in Canada showed that both Canadians and Albertans tend to go to libraries much more every year than the movie theater. So I think that showed how important a role they play in the entertainment and the cultural life of our residents. Also, something else that I wasn't quite appreciative of the library before was I knew they were doing naloxone training with their staff, but I didn't know that they were planning to do even more intensive training with their staff in terms of how to engage with vulnerable residents who show up in the library doors. The library really recognizes that it's the only public space that some of those residents have available to them, and the library can play an important part of support in their world. And so they're working to figure out how they can do that better, which was good for me to hear. It I think is an important service that libraries are being called on to do more and more of. 2 financial things that are worth looking at for council is one, the library board's currently working on a naming and naming and donations policy to help them better fundraise for operational and capital projects. And another financial thing of the library worth being aware of is the library board is currently working on strengthening some of its reserve policies. But one decision that was made for this fiscal year was to lower their unrestricted reserve by about 40%. So that's just them not having quite as big a safety margin, but make sure they can invest more of their money into community programs. So that's what I've got for the library board. The other thing worth updating you guys on is we had another Sport Connector board meeting that was kind of last-minute meeting put together to figure out how to respond to COVID-19. And something that the Sport Connector has shifted to is helping promote sport organizations that are going online. So there's a lot of nonprofits and a lot of businesses that are all of a sudden losing huge revenues. And they're making up for that by doing online classes, online consultations, online things of various sorts. You can check out everything that's available on the Sport Connector website. And the Sport Connector is helping them do that both to help residents figure out how they can be healthy and active while stuck in their homes, but also to help these organizations, especially the small businesses that are struggling to generate some revenue in these tough times. The other conversation we had at Sport Connector was realizing that our budget is going to be a lot challenging this year, in that we were planning to do a lot of fundraising and to increase sponsorship revenues, and that's going to be a lot more challenging. So we made a few tough decisions, including reducing staffing, which means the Sport Connector won't be able to offer quite as many services, and also we'll be having our employees start to work virtually to save money on rent every month. And so that was a couple tough decisions that I think were the right decisions to make in these tough financial times that are coming up.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Bressi. Councillor O'Toole, I believe you had Community Futures.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Given. Just let you know that the Community Futures office, the building is locked down, but the staff are working busier than Santa Claus's elves, trying to talk to all the clients and work with them. We're looking at everybody's working out of the home on computers and via telephone, so I guess you could call this the virtual days for the Community Futures. And just to pass on, Mayor Given, when you're talking to some of the politicians in Edmonton and Ottawa possibly, that the Community Futures is the backbone to small business, and just to make sure that the discussion gets around that we cannot stop the funding to this organization. It's supported so many businesses in this community that it's just a vital part of small business. And the banks at this particular time are not loaning money to small businesses. They're actually referring them to the Community Futures for funding sources. So if you could do that, that'd be great. And that's my report.
Thanks very much, Councillor O'Toole, and certainly we'll raise just how active our local community futures has been as an alternate lender that's been involved in a lot of great local business successes. So, Council, with that and with those reports,
actually, pardon me, Mayor Given.
Councillor Friesen.
Thank you. Yes, I did. When you had asked earlier, I actually had one that I did not mention. So, if I may.
Yes, please.
Thank you. South Peace Regional Archives was to have their annual general meeting this coming weekend, and in light of what's going on, of course, has the board unanimously voted to postpone until further notice. And for right now, the archives, along with the museum, which is housed down at the park as well, are closed to the public. And in addition, the executive director, Alyssa Curry, is working from home right now, self-isolating just due to international travel, although as last I heard, she's well. So that's where the archives are at. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much, Councillor Friesen. Thanks for that catch. So, Council, with that, I'm going to ask if we can defer Council Member Roundtable to our next Council meeting. I think we've been fairly successful so far with this virtual telecom meeting, but I don't know if I want to push our luck. And I'm not sure if I'm ready to do that step yet for Roundtable. So, Council, with your concurrence, I'm going to call our meeting adjourned. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.
And I'll look.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Safe and sound. Go home. You know, I don't know, bother.
Thanks very much, and we'll call our meeting adjourned. Thank you.